Oma Gyanatavinandasya Gyananjana Salakaya. Oma Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskatya Ete Satarane. According to Bhagavad Gita, if one is in the mode of goodness, then one has some knowledge. Tatra Sadve Maladvat Prakashakam Anamayam Sukha Sangena Bandhanti Jnana Sangena Chagnaga. That the mode of goodness is purer than the others and frees one from sinful reaction. Those in this mode develop knowledge but become conditioned by a sense of happiness. So the mode of goodness is not pure, but it's purer than the other modes. And therefore a Brahmin in the mode of goodness has certain qualities like sama, equanimity. Equanimity means that the mind is not disturbed by the material nature, as we were reading yesterday here. Prakasham cha pravittim cha moham eva cha pandava edveshti sampravritani ninivritani kangshate. Arjuna is asking 3 questions. Who remembers what the 3 questions were? What's the first question?
What are the symptoms?
Yes, of a person who's in transcendence. So this is the answer to the first question. Prakasham cha pravritim cha moham eva cha pandava adveshti sampravritani ninivritani kangshati. The first symptom is prakasham cha. He doesn't hate illumination, prakasham cha, nivritim cha, or attachment, or delusion when they're present, or longs for them when they're absent. He remains steady, knowing that the modes of material nature are active and that he's aloof from them. So that's the mode of goodness, that detachment from the super soul, taking direction from the false ego, and to respond to our position. And what is a false ego? False conception, to begin with. And what's the false conception? What's the first false conception we have? Krishna keeps on repeating throughout the Bhagavad Gita, from the beginning to the end.
We're not this body.
Yes, we're not this body. Samam pashanhi sarvatra, samavastitim ishvaram. Actually, samam saveshu bhuti, no. Samam pashanhi sarvatra, samam vastiti ishvaram. That's not right. No, I know, that's the next word. Samam pashanhi sarvatra, samavastiti nahinast bhavanasyantam yak pashyati sapashyati. One who can see the super soul present everywhere, well actually one who can see that, one who knows that the super soul, along with the soul within a destructible body, is never destroyed, he actually sees. As soon as we forget that, then we're in Maya. Of course, we're always in Maya, and even if we remember that, we'll still be in Maya to some degree, but we'll be in less Maya. In other words, we're looking at this what we think is reality and judging everyone according to their temporary bodies, thinking that someone is their body, and therefore judging people accordingly. Of course, we have to see people's bodies, because some bodies are in one mode of material nature, some bodies are in another material mode of material nature. So we have to be able to discriminate, but the idea is not to discriminate, to criticize. Generally people like to discriminate either to take advantage of others or to criticize them, which is the same result of the mode of ignorance and passion. One should see in the mode of goodness so that one can properly serve others. For instance, we throw prasadam to a tiger, we don't go in the cage and hug him. Oh, my dear tiger, oh, my long-last spiritual brother, let me embrace you. Because the tiger will not be able to reciprocate in a devotional way, and therefore one will simply sacrifice Krishna's body uselessly. So one has to know how to utilize Krishna's assets in Krishna's service, and one of the important things is how to reciprocate with others according to also their mode of material nature, but with the idea of giving them Krishna consciousness. Now, either our motivation is to gain something for ourselves or avoid loss for ourselves, or it's for Krishna. That's all. We may have more knowledge, but we may misuse that knowledge. Or we may have less knowledge, and we still may act properly, but not as effectively. But if we have more knowledge, then we can act more effectively, and we can properly utilize that knowledge. So, samam sarveshu bhuteshu, tishtantan parameshwaram, vinashava manashantak pashyati sapashyati. So we have to see that all living entities are actually spiritual souls. They may be in higher or lower positions temporarily, but this is not a permanent situation. If one is performing devotional service, for instance, then it is advised, Krishneti yasya giritam manasedriyeta dikshasti tat pranatibis chavajntam isham shushu shaya chavajnam ananya anya indanti simnyam hridayam isipta sangalabdya. So from the point of view of eternity, then we can act properly. And as soon as we forget eternity, as soon as we forget that we're eternal, that everyone else is eternal, then everything we're doing will be wrong, not beneficial for ourselves, ultimately, or for anyone else. We may teach someone to act in the mode of goodness with the hope that in the future they may get some awareness and become devotees, but that's not necessarily true. There are people who come to the mode of somewhat goodness and become demons. They're called asuram bhavam ashrityas. But from there, Krishneti yasya giritam manasedriyeta. For our own sake, if someone's chanting Hare Krishna, at least we have to respect them within our minds, although we may not intimately associate with them. We know that what they're doing is not conducive for self-realization, everything they're doing, but if they're doing something which is conducive to self-realization, then we respect them for that. Therefore in the next verse, Krishna says, Samam pashani savatra, samavastitim ishvaram, dehinastatmanatmanam tatoyiti paramgatim. One who sees the super soul accompanying the soul in all bodies and knows that neither the soul nor the super soul with an indestructible One who sees the super soul accompanying bodies in all bodies and equal everywhere does not degrade himself by his mind, and thus he approaches the supreme destination. So our most important asset we have, the most important thing, is where our mind is going. If our mind goes to the mode of ignorance, then we're going to the mode of ignorance. Now the soul is transcendental, but when he's in the material nature, it's important he doesn't become entangled with the lower modes. Otherwise he'll forget completely his superior nature and just become endlessly entangled in actions and reactions of the material energy. Therefore, when we're in the vision of eternity, knowing that the super soul is accompanying all bodies, neither the soul nor the super soul with indestructible bodies ever destroyed, that the super soul is everywhere, and that people are entangled because simply they have the wrong association, and therefore they're hearing the wrong things and developing the wrong desires, therefore doing the wrong things and degrading themselves. But if we get caught up and start criticizing people for being fallen in Maya without any higher sense of trying to help them, simply feeling superior, then the result is we become envious, first of all. Why is this person getting away with this? Why hasn't the lightning bolt struck them yet, and killed them for all their sinful activities? Why is Krishna maintaining them? Why is he even giving them prasadam? They've offended a great devotee, me. Therefore, Yamaraj is anxiously waiting to greet them. They're messengers of the Yamaraj, the Yamadutas. I'm sure they're already on the way to take care of this rotten soul. So the result is that simply we become more and more envious and we suffer more and more ourselves from such an attitude. As soon as we step away from the attitude of love, as soon as we step away from the acting with knowledge at least, even we may not feel overwhelming love, but as soon as we start acting whimsically according to our own lust, anger, or greed, and manifesting itself as illusion, then the result is that we suffer. The vulture is flying overhead, and he sees a cow on the ground and cursing the cow to die. Now the cow's not going to die because of the curse of the vulture, but the vulture is not in exactly the best mood. He has to suffer because of his mood that he's in. He may think, I'm going to get even with this person, I'm going to suffer like anything and make them feel bad. But actually they may not feel bad. They may feel good that you're suffering. So rather than wasting our time seeing things in the lower modes of material nature and therefore accepting this different mentalities ourselves in the lower modes of nature, why don't you try to see spiritually and respect people who are chanting Hare Krishna. Now we may not follow them, everything they're doing. We understand they're unfortunately being carried away by the modes of nature also, so we don't intimately associate with them. But at the same time, we shouldn't unnecessarily degrade our minds by becoming envious of them. Appreciating what they're doing right, and hopefully in the future what they're doing right will increase, what they're doing wrong will decrease. If one is in a shower, even though that one may be dirty, but in the course of time one will become clean. To criticize someone in the shower because they're dirty is useless. And such a criticism is unnecessary, and therefore one will simply suffer oneself from such useless criticism. One may be able to discern what's good and what's not good for someone, and out of compassion try to help them do what's good. So that's wanted. As a matter of fact, everyone in the material world is bad to one degree or another, and therefore something like book distribution, if you distribute books to someone, then the result is you're helping them. It's the only ultimate help you can give someone. You can give them some prasadam, but they may not understand what the prasadam, what the value of it is. You can give them a holy name, they may not listen, but you give them a book, it's something they can take home with them, and someone will benefit from it, and maybe one day they'll pick it up and listen to it. Therefore, if we wanted to analyze everyone on the street we were giving a book to find out if they were a good person or a bad person, whether they fed their cat today or not, we wouldn't be able to give anyone a book if we were in the mentality that only people I like or only people who come to my standard get the book, or hear the holy name, or get prasadam. This is not Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. And what to speak when we become familiar with a devotee or someone who's practicing devotional service, then we put them on a completely different standard. We don't want to give them Krishna, we want to just criticize them and curse them that they may fall down into the darkest regions of existence and never see the light of Krishna consciousness again. So such an envious mentality will simply degrade one, that's all. Because instead of contacting Paramatma and being his instrument, his servant, because that's what we're trying to be, one becomes a servant of the illusory energy, an illusory consciousness. Therefore one has to be conscious, be careful of how we're thinking. That's our most important asset. Because if we're thinking about Krishna, we'll go back to the spiritual world. At the end of death, at the time of leaving this body, ante narayana smriti, and we think of something else, we'll go wherever we're thinking about. So, practice. We practice something, then it becomes a habit, and a habit eventually becomes a character. So what we're thinking about right now is going to have a big effect about where we're going to be going in the future, what our future body will be. So we should take our most precious asset, our minds and our intelligence, and utilize them properly so that we get the most auspicious destination in our next lifetime. And realize how Maya, yogas chalati manasa, Maya is always trying to trick the devotee to see if he's sincere or not. Maya doesn't want insincere people to go back to the spiritual world. She doesn't want insincere people, devotees who are not serious, to associate with Krishna. Therefore, she's offering them to be tricked, but she's not demanding we become tricked. She's just offering our becoming tricked. And when we take it up, then we're tricked. Therefore, Ashwatthama, he had a bad master, Duryodhana, but not as bad as we may think. Duryodhana was a demon, undoubtedly a demon. Demon means that he didn't accept Krishna as he actually is, because he wasn't an ordinary demon. Ordinary demons don't take birth as a cousin, brother of God, and have the opportunity to associate with Krishna the way he did, although he was a demon. He offended Krishna, and he offended Krishna's devotees. Still, he had some brains. He had some knowledge. He was an ordinary demon. And therefore, when Ashwatthama killed the sleeping sons of Draupadi, they weren't little kids, by the way, they were grown-up soldiers on the battlefield. Still, he killed them sleeping, which is not ethical, because he thought he was going to satisfy his master, Duryodhana. But Duryodhana was not satisfied at all, because he had some culture. He was a demon, but he was a cultured demon. Therefore, he wasn't just like the ordinary kid you meet on the street with a switchblade trying to get your 50 cents. He had some culture. And therefore, he was disappointed. But Ashwatthama was bewildered because of bad association. And therefore, he didn't know what's to be done, what's not to be done. And therefore, he degraded his mind. And by his actions, he became even more degraded. So even a cultured person raised by a father like Dronacharya, a real Brahmin, can actually become degraded if he does a sinful activity, like killing innocent people, killing soldiers when they're sleeping. What to speak of the Pandava soldiers. Therefore, he had lost his intelligence, and he's somewhere in the Himalayas or somewhere, he's still suffering from the reaction, 5,000 years later, for what he did. So we have to be careful, dealing with Krishna, dealing with his devotees, dealing with anyone, dealing with any living entity. Otherwise, we may put ourselves in a position where it's going to take a whole lot of time before we actually make any progress in devotional service. Therefore, out of all the different injunctions and laws and suggestions, as we find in Chaitanya Bhagavat, don't offend devotees. Offenses against the devotees, beginning with Krishneti yasya giritam manasedriyeta, because it all begins in the mind. If we allow the mind to think of any crazy thing, and we go along with it, then the mind will take our intelligence away. And when our intelligence is taken away, then our activities will become material, will become sinful. Will become one way or another, to some degree or another. We'll get carried away by the lust, anger, and greed. Therefore, one has to check the mind by the intelligence. When Krishna tells Arjuna that you know it's to be done, but you don't do it. So what's the cause? Arjuna asked Krishna. So Krishna says it's lust. We may think it's justice. This person wronged me, and now I'm going to seek justice. I become the temple sheriff. meting out justice to all the criminals within the temple who offended me. We may think like that, but that's not our duty. That's not what Krishna wants us to do. Unless he appoints you the sheriff. You know what a sheriff is? What do they call in India the chief constable? The policeman in India, what do they call it? Constable? What's that?
English word. Common English word. Constable.
Constable. They have that in India too?
Daroga.
What's that?
Daroga.
Daroga. Daroga. That means expensive in Russian. Daroga. Anyhow, we're not the chief policeman here in the temple trying to arrest all the offenders. Krishna has never, I don't think he's appointed anyone to that position. I'm deputized by Yamaraj to give you the reactions for your sinful activities of offending the devotees, especially me. I've been deputized by Yamaraj. No, that's not our position. We're supposed to find out what Krishna wants us to do. But why don't we do it? Is out of justice, as a feeling that justice may reign, and I'm going to sacrifice my Krishna consciousness for the justice in the world. So the balance of injustice can be weighed properly, so I'll sacrifice everything for it. No, we're not supposed to sacrifice our Krishna consciousness, because then we're part of the problem rather than part of the solution. Even Bhumi the cow didn't want to condemn Kali in the form of a king who's beating on her, because she knew that ultimately the cause was Krishna, and that better to tolerate than start criticizing Krishna. Of course, if we can do something positive to help ourselves and to help others, that's very nice. And it's not that, as we can see here, Arjuna, he thinks that, well, I don't want to offend Ashwatthama. No, Ashwatthama, Arjuna properly understood, he degraded himself in terms of as an animal, and therefore he treated him like an animal. But he didn't become envious, because he was working under the direction of Krishna. And therefore, ultimately, whatever he was going to do was for Ashwatthama's benefit also. Because Krishna, as it says here, as we'll find out, his eyes are like lotuses. He always acts for the benefit of the living entity because he knows exactly what's necessary for them. Arjuna's eyes will be like red-hot copper balls. He's also transcendental, but he's an instrument for Krishna for justice. But Krishna doesn't have to do justice himself. He has his energies to do justice, therefore he's always neutral. So sometimes we may become instruments for Krishna, but generally we're not Kshatriyas. Even you learn a little bit of martial arts, you don't become a Kshatriya. You become a street fighter. That's not a Kshatriya. No, we're supposed to act as devotees, which is above the Brahminical platform, and see things as devotees, and then act accordingly. And if we don't do that, then we're just missing out on developing our higher sentiment of love and appreciation, which will make us happy. We can't be happy unless we love others. We can't look at someone and become angry at them because they're not bowing down before me as God. Do they know who they offended? Do they know what the reaction is? Do they know where they're going as a result? Don't they know? So let me teach them. I'll become angry, you rascal, don't you know? So then we just lose our consciousness. And don't we know? The question is, don't we know? That's our responsibility to know. We're not in charge of that everyone else has to know. Our only business is that we have to know. And then act accordingly. For our own benefit. Even when we can't benefit anyone else, at least we should benefit ourselves. Now whatever Arjuna is going to do will be perfect because he's working under Krishna's direction. And what we do is also be perfect if we act according to Krishna's direction. Shiksha Guru Ke Ta Krishnaras Rup Antayami Bhakta Shesta Eduri Rup. One should know the super soul is a representative of Krishna. The Bhakti Antaryami, the super soul, and also the best devotee, they're also two representatives of Krishna. They're the representatives of the super soul. So undoubtedly everyone is taking advice from others, but Ashwatthama took advice from Duryodhana, who was his master, but it was bad advice. And actually it wasn't even his advice. He was just concocting what he thought Duryodhana wanted. He could have went to Duryodhana and asked him. He just concocted it. And therefore he got himself and others into difficulty. So we have to choose Mahajano Yena Katasa Panta, a personality, and take shelter, Antaryami of the super soul, and Bhakta Shesa, the best devotee. And the best devotee, like, we have to read his books, like Prabhupada's books, find out what is the vision or reality, and act accordingly. And if we step away from that, then if we do that, then we'll do good for ourselves and do good for others. If we step away from that, we won't do good for ourselves and others, and we'll just waste our time, especially our time. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? So when we see the world, what does Krishna say? Tasmat tvam indriya nyado niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajihiyenam jnana vijnana nashanam. Then one should regulate the senses. Tasmat tvam indriya nyado. One should control the senses by regulation, and that's by spiritual strength. Conquer this insatiable enemy. Actually, that's not even what it says. Tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajihiyenam jnana vijnana. Therefore, doing the best of the Bharatas, in the beginning, slay this symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. So this is the knowledge we have to have. Indriyani mano buddhira asyadishtanam uchate. No. Indriyani mano buddhira. Indriyabhik paramanak manasastu pura buddhir yo buddhe paratastu saha. The working senses are superior to dull matter. The mind is higher than the senses, intelligence is higher than the mind, and he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. That's knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material mind, senses, mind, and intelligence. One should control the lower self by the higher, and thus conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So lust is our anger, is our enemy, not these devotees or people in general or other living entities or circumstances. Our real enemy is lust within the mind, which covers us and forces us to act in a way that we forget Krishna. That's our problem. So we can conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust by knowing oneself to be superior to the senses, mind, and intelligence, and therefore take shelter of Krishna with our intelligence. Then in all circumstances we'll be victorious. Like Ambarish Maharaj. He was faced with death because unjustly Durvasa Muni was going to kill him, but he didn't become envious of Durvasa Muni and curse him. Instead, he took shelter of Krishna and became ecstatic under those circumstances, knowing well that nothing happens without the will of Govinda. Anything? Any questions or comments? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your lecture. Maybe I have some stupid question, but...
We don't allow stupid questions here.
Then I'll say let's see what kind of question I have. My question is, you do something wrong to another person, and it's necessary always to say sorry, or you can just try to be honest with yourself to see that you did bad and leave it like it is, because sometimes it's hard to approach to somebody and say sorry, although you really regret what you did. I mean,
well, you really, I don't know, it's too hypothetical a question, but generally speaking, if it's possible to say sorry in a sincere way that actually the person feels that you're actually sorry, that you're willing to make up for it. Not I keep on stepping on your foot and keep on saying sorry, sorry. One should be actually sorry. And if the person, or devotee especially, if they forgive you, then you're relieved of a lot of reactions, because if not, then you'll probably repeat the same thing again and again until you actually feel sorry and ask for forgiveness. Otherwise, you're also, if you offended someone, just like Rupa Goswami, he was sitting there meditating on Krishna's pastimes with the cowherd boys, his bhajan kutira, in complete ecstasy and laughing, and one older Vaishnav, senior Vaishnav, was walking by who's crippled, and he heard Rupa Goswami laughing when he walked by, and he thought Rupa Goswami is laughing at my being crippled. Why is Rupa Goswami doing this? And then he became offended. And then Rupa Goswami's meditation broke. He couldn't remember Krishna's pastimes with the cowherd boys anymore. So then, Rupa Goswami was asked Sanatana Goswami, why is it that my meditation broke? I can't remember these pastimes anymore. So he said, maybe you offended a Vaishnava. So how do I know if I offended a Vaishnava? Well, call a big festival and invite all the Vaishnavas and see who doesn't come. So Rupa Goswami had a big festival, all the Vaishnavas came, Prasadam and Kirtan, but one senior Vaishnava didn't come, so then Rupa Goswami realized he had offended him. So he went to him and asked for forgiveness and asked what he did wrong. He said he was surprised that Rupa Goswami was laughing at him when he was passing by because he was crippled. So Rupa Goswami explained that actually I wasn't laughing at you, I was meditating on some pastimes with Krishna and the cowherd boys, and they were having a lot of fun, and I was laughing. And then he realized that actually he wasn't offended, and Rupa Goswami could go back to his meditation.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande.